Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 of my beginner golfer series. I'm making these series of videos just for people who are new to the game of golf and are just looking for some general information on how to get started with things. So I get a lot of questions from people who I coach myself on when to use each club, what the differences are. So we'll just be going over that today. So let's get started. Okay, so in the golf bag, there's 5 different types of clubs. I actually meant 6 if you include the putter. So the first type are wedges, the second, irons, third, hybrids, fourth, woods, and fifth is a driver. So the first type of golf club I'm going to be going over are the wedges. So these right here are from an old set of mine. I played these clubs when I was like 16 years old. They are, I don't know if you can see it, but it's the Callaway X16s, steelheads. Yeah, you'll see some letters at on the bottom of the club here. And these are all clubs that you could typically find in the store, right? So the first is an L, or a lob wedge. The second is a P, pitching wedge. And the third is an S, a sand wedge. Okay, so let's go over the L wedge first. Okay, so the L wedge, right, you can see has a number on it. Oops, right here. I think you can hopefully see that, 58 degrees. So what that is showing you is the amount of loft on the club. So the amount of loft on the club, so if I put this club down like this, if you just imagine kind of a line just going straight up, 58 degrees is just the difference from this straight up line to where the club face ends. So that's about 58 degrees for the lob wedge. And that's how the loft is kind of made up. The S wedge. Okay, so now this one is saying that it has 54 degrees of loft. Okay, so slightly lower, about 4 degrees less. So still has a pretty significant amount of loft, but obviously it will just go typically a bit further than the L wedge, and maybe slightly lower. This is the pitching wedge right here. Okay, so this one has 46 degrees of loft, so it's getting a bit lower now. Typically the higher the loft, or the more loft there is on a golf club, the higher you will hit the ball and the shorter the ball will go, generally. Okay, so the L wedge typically has the most loft in your bag. So this will be going the highest but the shortest. Okay, so now just going over the functions of each. So typically with wedges, you'll be using this when you get fairly close to the green, when you don't have to hit it very, very far. Or you'd be using these clubs to kind of get over certain obstacles, like a bunker, like a sand bunker, or any sort of kind of trap that's between you and the hole. Just because the more loft there is on the club, the easier it will be for you to get the ball up higher. Okay, so that's just a very general or typical scenario for you to use these wedges. And so I know that the name of each wedge, like the S wedge, is called a sand wedge. So a lot of people think that you have to use this club just only in the sand. And that is not true. So you can really use any golf club that you want out of the sand. It does not matter. There's no rule preventing you from using certain clubs anywhere. But yeah, just depending on how far away you are from the hole, how high you want to play it, determines which club you'll use. So this one's called a pitching wedge. With the pitching wedge, you don't necessarily have to use only this club when you're trying to get it on the green. So don't get that kind of idea in your head. You can use any club that you want in your bag, and it just depends on the scenario, right? Now that you kind of know what the differences are with each of these 3 wedges, when you're trying to determine which one to use, just always remember that everyone hits it differently. Everyone's distances will be different just depending on your swing, how fast you swing it, what your contact is like, things like that. So it really depends. You got to go out and figure out which each of these clubs, their distances go for you. And then through kind of experience, you'll have a better idea of which one to choose in certain scenarios. Okay, so that's the kind of general explanation of the wedges. So we'll get started on the irons. Right, okay, so for the irons, so typically when you go to the store, there will be about, besides if you don't count the wedges, there's going to be about 6 irons or types of irons that will be displayed. So there will be like a 9 iron, 8 iron, 7, 6, 5, and a 4 iron typically. I have these irons from my own set here, so you can see this is a 9 iron, and then this is a 4 iron. Okay, so if I explain the differences between just these two clubs, it'll be really easy for you to kind of know the differences between all the other kinds of irons. Okay, a lot of beginners tell me about or ask me about the numbers. So typically, the lower the number on the club, the longer the club is, and the less loft there is. So the longer the club is and the less loft there is, the further you should hit it, and the lower the ball will typically launch. Okay, so if I show you the 2 irons side by side here, 4 iron on the left, 9 iron on the right, you can kind of see visually from the top at least just the difference in the loft between the two. So all the numbers kind of between the 9 and the 4 will kind of progressively get lower and lower loft if you start from the 9 iron down. Okay, so I put all the clubs on the ground, kind of lined them up as best I could. So on the far left side here, that's the 9 iron. Then from I guess bottom to top goes 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and 4. So now, I'll put it at a different angle. When you look at the butt ends of each club, you can see that they're kind of they progressively get longer and longer. The lower the number gets on the club head as well. So just to kind of give you a better visual of what the changes in lengths are. Okay, now that you know generally the differences between each iron, knowing when to use them, again, changes from person to person. Like how I explained with the wedges, everyone hits them different distances. So just depending on how you swing the golf club, how good you strike the golf ball, all plays into how far you can hit each club. So for instance, if you're on the golf course and you are a certain distance from the hole, and you knew that, say, your 9 iron was going to get there, you choose your 9 iron. Or if you were further away, you would choose a 7 iron, right? It really depends on you and your game and how far you're hitting each club to determine which one to use. So now that you have an idea of that, we'll move on to the hybrids. Okay, so on to hybrids. So this one is one that I used in the past. It's a TaylorMade M1 3 hybrid, 19 degrees of loft. And you'll notice that it's designed differently. You can see if I put it from the side here, it looks somewhat similar to an iron, but just the back end is kind of a lot longer, and from underneath you can see it's a lot wider as well. So now the reason why they call this a hybrid is because it's designed somewhat in between your iron and your woods. So once I go over the woods, you'll kind of know, you'll have an idea why they call it a hybrid, right? But yeah, this is obviously a bit longer than your irons. The shafts will be a little bit different. You can put typically nowadays they'll have graphite shafts in them, but you can put steel shafts in it as well. But yeah, this will go further than a 4 iron in your bag. So you can choose to put this in your bag as well. So the benefit of hybrids is that because the way it's designed, it helps you get the ball in the air, or makes it easier for you to get the ball in the air. So what a lot of beginners do, or what I recommend a lot of my beginner golfers, is instead of putting a 4 iron or 3 iron in the bag, you can just substitute it with a 4 or 3 hybrid. They're essentially the same club, basically the same loft, but just the way that it's designed just makes it easier for you to get the ball in the air. And most people who start off, they don't typically hit a 3 or 4 iron just because it's really difficult to hit. It's even though you might make contact with the ball, the ball might not get off the ground very easily. So a hybrid is a good substitute for that. Okay, so this is just another view of the 3 iron. Okay, So now I'm just going to pull in the 3 hybrid just so you can see the difference. Right, so this is what the hybrid would look like from the top view. So now when you put them side by side, oops. Okay, so right in here, right, so you can see that they have the same number on it, very similar to lofts, but obviously they're designed completely different. So on the right, the hybrid is designed so that it's just easier for you to get the ball in the air. People starting out who have a 3-iron in their bag, I always tell them to just take it out, because there's no point in having a club that's going to just get barely off the ground. It's just no fun either, so I always recommend you can substitute your 3-iron, even your 4-iron as well, with a 3 or 4 hybrid. So definitely will make your life a lot easier on the golf course. So when we get into woods now, the changes in the clubs will be a lot more significant at this point. So this is the 3 wood that I use. So this is again the M1, and I think you can see that it shows 15 degrees of loft. Now you can see that the bottom compared to the hybrid, it's even wider than where the hybrid was, and when I put it to the front view, you can see it's even longer than the hybrid as well. So that's kind of why the hybrid's called the hybrid, in between the irons and the woods. And the other difference between the woods and the irons now is that it becomes significantly longer. So in just this next clip here, I'll just kind of show you the difference on how significant the length is between a 3 wood and your irons. Okay, so now when I put some clubs side by side here, so on the bottom there's the 9-iron, then it goes 4-iron, and then the hybrid, and then the 3 wood. Okay, so now when I go show you the length or difference in the length, it's pretty significant from the 9-iron all the way up to the 3 wood. The 3 wood is about close to 3 inches longer than the 9-iron. So now when it gets up to that length, it gets pretty hard, or a lot harder to control the swing as well. Now a lot of beginners that I teach, I always see this in their bag, a 3 wood. And it's not always a really good thing to have in their bag as a beginner, and I find that a lot of them don't even use it most of the time off the fairway. It can be okay off the tee, but since there's very little loft now at this point with this club, it's all about being able to get the ball in the air consistently as a beginner, and with this club it makes it really hard. So until your swing is at a certain level or a certain point to where your contact is somewhat consistent, a 3 wood might not be the always the best club for you to use up until this point, at least. And there are different kind of woods as well. There's like a 5 wood or 4 wood, even 7 woods, right? But just because it's considered a wood, always pay attention to what the lofts are, because when you get into a 5 wood instead of a 3, it becomes closer or similar to your hybrids again. So you could even just take this 3 wood out of the bag completely for now, and just get efficient with the irons and hybrids that you have. Finally, we have the driver. So now this club is the longest club in your bag, also goes the farthest as well. So now when you look at the bottom of mine, right here, okay, it's really wide. Also now even longer than the 3 wood. Okay, so from hybrids, woods to driver, just the back gets longer and the bottom gets wider, all the way up until this point. Typically this club's used off the first tee. On your first shot, you see a lot of the pros, whatever, hit this club off the first tee. But again, you are allowed to use any club that you want, but typically this is used off the tee. Okay. And I'll show you visually what the difference is from the top view between the driver, woods, and the hybrids. Okay, so from the front or the top views, you can now kind of see the difference between the driver on the left here, 3 wood, and the hybrids. So as you progress towards the driver, you can see that the back end of each club gets longer as well. Okay, so my driver has about, it says 9.5, but I have it set so that it's kind of at 8.5 degrees of loft. Now you can see that the loft is in the single digits now, and that's typically why the driver is used off the tee. You'll see that the ball is kind of put on this little plastic or wooden little tee that kind of elevates it off the ground. And yeah, so now you no longer really hit the driver off of the ground typically, just because there's such little loft, right? Number 6 is the putter. So now the putter actually has the least amount of loft out of all the golf clubs. Typically in the store or any other golf club that you'll find typically has around 3 to 4 degrees of loft. So just because it has a lot lower loft doesn't mean it's going to go the farthest. So now the reason why it has such very little loft is now the purpose of the club is not to hit the ball in the air, but to actually roll it. So you typically use the putter when you're on the putting green, trying to roll the ball into the hole. So the putter I use is the Even Roll ER6. So there's a lot of different design putters, but they all basically accomplish the same thing. They roll the putt or roll the ball along the green. So if you guys have some questions on the design of the putter, let me know, and maybe I'll make a separate video about that. Alright everyone, so that's the general overview of all the golf clubs and kind of what the differences are. I hope you guys got some information about some golf clubs and what they do typically. If you got some more questions, please leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.